In the past couple of years, a lot of new people have gotten into the Yakuza series, whether it's thanks to all the memes, the sales on Steam and PlayStation, or just the games being available on Xbox Game Pass. With these new players naturally comes a lot of new fans. But given the scope of the games and the similarities between all of them, there are some conflicting arguments online over which order to play them in or which single game to play if you could only pick one. But I wanted to make this video to try and help out those unfamiliar with the franchise and understanding which game is which, so to speak, because I've had some of my mates wanting to get into the series, as well as seeing some people online with the same desire. But there is a bit of confusion. Even recently, I actually went to a retro game store in the middle of nowhere, and I bought the first two Yakuza games on the PS2. Yakuza 1 was all good, but then I noticed Yakuza 2 literally had the Yakuza 1 case, but with a big 2 drawn on it, and apparently no one that worked at the shop had realized that that's not the actual cover, even though the cover... You can tell it's literally just Yakuza 1, 2, but anyway. One of the dudes there said to me, yeah, they all are on Xbox Game Pass recently, but I couldn't really tell the difference between them because all like the box arts look the same, yeah? And I, being the social butterfly that I am, simply said, yeah. But in my head, I thought, are you stupid? Look at the giant numbers on them, you absolute... Anyway, to start, there's a large variety of games that are available on modern platforms, which are essentially all you should be looking for, which I just call the modern Yakuza games. These games, in release order, are Yakuza 3 Remastered, 4 Remastered, 5 Remastered, 0, and Kiwami 1. Then there are the Dragon Engine games, which if you don't know what video game engines are, then feel free to make a post on Reddit as though you know every single detail about them, but anyway. First Dragon Engine game was Yakuza 6, then Kiwami 2, Judgment, Like a Dragon, and most recently, Lost Judgment. With this in mind, if you're an average Xbox Game Pass enjoyer, I know it's the earliest game there on the list, but whatever you do not start with Yakuza.
Great news! What?
RGG Studios and the guys that make the Yakuza games, just to spite me, have put Yakuza 0, Kiwami 1, and Kiwami 2 back on Game Pass, which means that now everything I'm saying is pointless. Speaking of the remasters, Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 were all remastered recently, and given the release of 2 remakes of the first 2 Yakuza games, those being Kiwami 1 and Kiwami 2, the oldest, in big fat quotation marks, of all the modern games is Yakuza 0, which fortunately means that it is the cheapest by quite an amount. Then there's the newest game, that being Lost Judgment. It's a sequel to Judgment, which is actually a spin-off of the Yakuza series, but it's a spin-off in the same way that frickin' Pepsi Max is a spin-off of regular Pepsi. It's basically the same thing, but the Judgment games have their own self-contained story with no characters tying over from the Yakuza series, although places and events do. Same universe, different story basically. Finally, there's the most unique Yakuza game, that being Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is actually Yakuza 7, so it continues on from Yakuza 6, albeit with a new protagonist and whatnot, as to give the series a fresh take. But it is also weirdly a turn-based JRPG, so if you like those, it's good. But if you like my mates, particularly my mate Jordan, who suck at action games, or you're one of those game journalists that call it Yakuza, this is definitely an easier game to get into. Another more accepting and accessible feature of Judgment, Like a Dragon, and Lost Judgment is that the 3 of them have English dubs.
Get fucked, you cum stain!
As opposed to the rest of them, which are only dubbed in Japanese.
Yes, sir!
They're all subtitled in English, but there's no English audio. They do all have the options for the Japanese audio as well, so if you prefer one or the other, you can go right ahead and pick, as they're both actually quite good. But don't listen to what people say online, they're just racist or something, I don't know. With these facts in mind, I have secretly presented you with the 3 best starting points to get into the series. Realistically, you could start with whatever you want, as the Yakuza games rely scarily little on previous game stories, and will instead only rely on plot points that are kinda impossible to ignore, like at the start of Yakuza 6, for example, an entire section of the city that all the games take place in was rebuilt. With that being said though, if you do want the best starting point in terms of story, you can start with Yakuza 0 and move through the games chronologically. It's a prequel to the very first Yakuza game, and it especially doesn't require you to be familiar with any of the series' story, because this is the origin of it all, so to speak. The Genesis. You know, like the band. If you're not good at action games, like Jordan, for example, or if you like to take things a bit slower, or maybe you just like JRPGs, you can start with Like a Dragon. As I said, it is a JRPG, but at its core, it still has a great story, some of the most boppin' music ever, and plenty of fun activities on the side to keep you busy. Both of these games, Yakuza 0 and Like a Dragon, are available on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox, with Like a Dragon being available on Xbox Game Pass, which is awesome. But unfortunately, at the time of making this video, Judgment and Lost Judgment are are only on PlayStation and Xbox. Judgment, specifically, is not on Xbox One, but that's because originally it was a PS4 exclusive, and then they ended up doing a next-gen remaster, which unfortunately meant that they didn't retroactively port it to the Xbox One. So Judgment is not on the Xbox One, but Lost Judgment is. But hey, if you want the most modern game with gameplay that makes the other games look like they're held together with a rubber band and maybe a styrofoam cup, Lost Judgment is amazing and without a doubt my personal favorite of the entire series, and definitely the best thing that this company has ever made. So if you do want to play one to see if you'll enjoy the series or not, or can only play one single game, these are probably your best bets. Unfortunately, you might see a lot of people trying to suggest online that you have to play every single game in the series or else you're a fake fan, but there's also a lot of stupidity around shitting on people that only play Yakuza 0, for example, even though it is easily one of the best, but whatever. Some people also like to insist that you have to play the games in release order, starting with the very first game, simply called Yakuza on the PS2, because if you don't do that, then apparently you're some phony fake fan who should die. The first two games are very old, with a dogshit camera you can't control, and a lot of old game itis like save points being thrown around further than an Olympic javelin, and schlunky wonky motion blur because people back then thought it looked so cool.
Shut the fuck up.
They're also only on the PS2 in English, or there was a Japanese remaster on the PS3 which does let you move the camera, but as I said, is only available in Japan. But let's be real here. We all know that if you walk into a GameStop and ask for a PS2 maybe, that you'll be promptly killed, and so unless you want to go through the effort of emulation, you're better off just playing the two remakes of the first two games, those being Kiwami and Kiwami 2, because well, you can actually buy those. Finally, I'll cap off these videos, whoops, I meant to say this video, with a few gameplay strats you can follow for the 3 games I recommended. I say 3, but besides Like a Dragon, all the games do actually play the same way. They have their own differences and whatnot, but if you can beat one of them, you can beat all of them. But don't do stuff like mashing the light attack button. It's also not the best to always do a full hit combo than a finisher, or spam light heavy, light heavy, light heavy, you know. Be sure as well to hold whatever the fighting stance button is, that being R1, RB, or whatever your keyboard controls are, in order to readjust your character, especially in boss fights. You don't always need it, but it is very helpful. Speaking of keyboard and mouse, don't. And another don't is, for the love of God, please understand that throwing weapons does like no damage. Don't be like that one dude who just sits there spamming circle to throw chairs and shit. Jordan. Another thing is that unlike real life, being drunk in the Yakuza games is actually quite beneficial for you. When you're drunk, your heat generates a lot faster than usual, which your heat is what you use to use your big special attacks, those being heat actions, so it's not really a bad idea to go around town and have a couple shots every now and then. But where you need to stay cautious is always remember to bring some healing items with you. Even if you think you have enough, you don't really use your inventory for much else, so you may as well just go crazy and chuck some healing items in there. Another caution is that if you're early in the story, whatever you do, don't try and grind for XP or money. The games will just literally up the amount you get as you progress, as well as spawning more enemies that will just give you free shit anyway, so it's not worth the time grinding on the early chapter enemies. Finally, all the games will typically have a counter attack you can use where you hold R1 and press triangle, or RB and press Y, or whatever your buttons are, which in most of the games is something like the Tiger Drop. The timing's a little difficult, however, thankfully with all of my hours in each game, can say I have the exact timing down to a science, and I'm kidding. I screw it up like half the time, I swear. Anyway, if we wanted to look at specific games, for Yakuza 0, it takes a kinda painful amount of time to get good abilities, especially for Kiryu, one of the playable characters, because a lot of his super duper uber useful and good abilities are locked behind a lot of time investment. But before then, I'll be honest, you can kinda just get away with swapping to the Beast style and slamming people in the head with bikes, and as Majima, you can also get away with just spinning around on the floor with the Breaker style, but for bosses, I don't know, just kinda hit them until they die. It's not really that hard, to be honest. For Lost Judgment, the same general tips apply, although the balancing of the game is a lot better, so without any abilities, you aren't a worthless sack of potatoes. I personally think that the best ability in the game is this, the Secret and Hidden Arts of the Crane, which you can upgrade 3 times and also get pretty quickly. Also, it is definitely worth getting some of the abilities that increase the amount of XP you earn, or SP as the game calls it. Lost Judgment's good because you can just sort of get whatever you think might be useful, except for these ones, they kind of suck, so you can just do whatever you like. Lost Judgment as well heavily encourages the use of all of your available fighting styles, as well as providing you with accolades and random street fights, which is probably the best thing to aim for in terms of getting even more XP. But for example, a good one is defeating at least one enemy in the 3 main fighting styles in order to get a nice little bonus. Now finally, for Yakuza Like a Dragon, you eventually get this party member with white hair, and he literally just starts with like the best ability in the game, and one shots like everyone, and he goes like 3 times per enemy.
What were they thinking?
Anyway, he's overpowered, just spam him. Now, if you're watching this as an already established Yakuza fan and think it might be a good idea to share it with one of your friends wishing to get into the games, well, I hope that they aren't absolutely shit like Jordan, but also that you do share it with them, or at least try to get them into the series. As a big fan myself, I can easily without a doubt say that they all have fantastic gameplay, captivating stories, and I also quite literally have like 500 Yakuza songs in my Spotify playlist, so I mean, you know. Now, if you become a fan and become engaged in the community, you may find that there are a lot of excellent memes. We've got face app edits of the characters. Oh, yeah, no, that's it.